Welcome to Beat Source Tech. My name's Mojax and today we're taking a look at the Opus Quad from Pioneer DJ, an all-in-one standalone device which really pushes their line in some whole new directions. I'm going to do something quite different in this review. I'm going to spend quite a lot of it talking about how the Opus Quad looks. Normally that's not really important, but the Opus is clearly very unusual in its design and styling. Pioneer DJ are pushing things in entirely new directions for their line here. Aesthetic taste is, of course, highly personal. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I've had a few other people say to me that they think the Opus is indeed beautiful, and their opinion is just as valid as mine. Many would argue, in fact, more valid. Have you seen how I dress? But these are my opinions nonetheless. And cards on the table, I'm not feeling the looks at all. Some elements in isolation, the minimalist screen printing, the curvy edges on the aluminium top panel, I can dig. But when you combine all of the elements together, the Opus Quad is a lot. For starters, there are the big wings out to the side. I don't mind how they look too much, but because the deck sections are like CDJs, they aren't mirrored, which means the play-pause buttons and pitch faders are different distances from the front edge. They're actually lined up perfectly when compared with the crossfader, but it really kind of spins me out. It's the kind of optical illusion that, once I see it, I can't ever unsee it. I'm also no fan of the fact that the whole device slopes upwards from the front to the rear. I like my DJ gear to be flat. I don't like sloping mixers and I don't enjoy using CDJs on angled stands. Lots of people are into that and that's fair enough, but I'm just less comfortable if my gear isn't horizontal. And that's one area where the styling does impact on the ergonomics, how the gear feels to use. There's also the question of how you store and transport the Opus too. Do you have a flight case or stand built that also has wings? And if not, and you're putting it into a regular box, what's the point of having those in the first place? Beyond all that though, there are two pure styling elements which I really can't get on with at all. The biggest offender is the ribbed front and side panels. Not so much for their design, but because Pioneer DJ have made them beige. They give the impression of pretending to be wood and remind me of a budget hi-fi from the 80s or an old Atari. They just look cheap to me. So that's a colour issue more than anything, but it's confounded by the bizarre decision that Pioneer DJ have made to include a few knobs in a kind of rose gold finish. They clash with the brown, and then the default jog wheel LED colour is amber, which clashes with both the brown panels and the rose gold. Honestly, if the Opus was all black or black and silver or even white for the bougie mobile DJs who like all white everything, I could get down with the looks. It would be reminiscent of the custom booth that Swedish House Mafia had built for Coachella in 2022, that kind of vibe. It still wouldn't be my preferred aesthetic. I always prefer more industrial styling, but I wouldn't have taken against it so strongly. Okay, so that's all my opinion and based on my taste. Yours will probably be different and I'd love to hear your takes on how the Opus Quad looks in the comments below. So let's park that for now and move on to what's actually important. Firstly, we'll talk price. The Opus Quad is, I believe, the most expensive all-in-one standalone ever made at a fairly eye-watering $3,200 in the US. That's around $700 more than the $2,500 street price of the XDJ XZ. But still, of course, dramatically less than a full CDJ 3000 and DJM A9 rig, especially with more than 2 decks. And that's how I think Pioneer DJ are squaring the value proposition for the Opus, because this is the first standalone from the company which actually features 4 decks on board. The XDJ XZ has 4 channels, but can only play 2 decks internally. You had to add on CDJs to get the full 4. The 4-deck control is a very smooth experience overall. Simple buttons go between 1 and 3 on the left and 2 and 4 on the right. The jog wheel LEDs are different for each, so you know what's active and what isn't. You can choose to have 2 or 4 overview waveforms on the screen, although strangely, only 2 of the large scrolling waveforms can be shown on screen at once. I hope Pioneer DJ can add a view with all 4 on there at some point, because currently that's a bit of a miss. That brings me to the screen, and it's the company's best yet. It's a big 10.1-inch display and is a proper multi-touch capacitive panel like a phone or a tablet. It's much crisper and cleaner looking than even the CDJ 3000 screen, and touch control is precise and responsive. The viewing angles seem wider too, with no washout as you look askance at it. That's not the only screen on the Opus Quad, of course. There are 2 more above each deck. I'm into that. Some might be happier with them in the jog wheels, but as someone who's very comfortable on CDJs, their location here works just as well, if not better for me. And because they're not trying to fit a lot of right-angled GUI elements into a round space, it actually makes better use of the available room. Those displays aren't touchscreens, but the resolution is solid and they are bright and vibrant, again with wide viewing angles. Speaking of the jog wheels, they are for me an area where the aesthetics first philosophy of the Opus seems to come into play. They are mechanical jogs and, as far as I can tell, perform exactly the same as those found on the CDJ3000s. Scratching, pitch bending and cueing is all right on point. But whilst the edge design is okay, I don't really like the look of it, but it works great, the top surfaces are completely smooth with none of the texture found on CDJs. And whilst I get the idea of making them super clean looking, to me that actually compromises the feel. The tops are made with a slightly sticky feeling, almost rubbery finish to ensure they're still grippy, and I don't enjoy the feel of that anything like as much as I do the CDJ3000 jogs. So whilst I'm totally happy with how they perform, I still feel like there's a bit of form over function going on here. Combine that with the more basic, if functional, central displays, a natural result of having the extra screens up top, and the overall jog situation feels a little less premium than perhaps it should on a $3,000 device. Keeping it hardware before we move on to a demo of the features, let's get into the sound. As with other recent high-end Pioneer DJ gear, the Opus features 32-bit ESS technology DACs, and I found the sound to be of excellent quality, whether playing tracks internally or using external sources. Even the phono preamps are solid. I recorded a bunch of vinyl into it, and the results were very good. So I do believe the Opus Quad delivers on the kind of sound you'd expect at this price. Construction is, for all the unusual looks, quite normal by Pioneer DJ all-in-one standards. The main outer body of the Opus Quad is mostly plastic with an aluminium top plate. It's built much like the XZ at its core. It's no lightweight, weighing in at just over 29 pounds, and it's big too, almost 36.5 inches wide and a little under 20 inches deep. It's also quite tall, at least at the rear, with the top of the screen sitting over 5.5 inches above the desktop. It's the kind of device you'll definitely want to get a solid flight case to transport in. The faders are solid, if not terribly exciting. From what I can tell, they're much the same as those found on the XZ, and they have a smooth, dependable feel with nice weighting. My only disappointment is that the crossfader isn't one of Pioneer DJ's Magvel units, so whilst it still performs well enough, it's not quite on the same level as one of those when it comes to cutting and scratching. I will quickly mention the 8 hot cues found below the screens on the deck sections. These are clicky buttons, not pads, and being placed roughly in the same place as on the CDJ3000, I found them very comfortable to use. It's interesting to me that Pioneer DJ have made these purely cues and not given them a mode button for other functions. DJs coming from the XZ or one of the RX models might feel a little restricted by not having that, as those have pads. I do also wonder if this will lead to some limitations when Pioneer DJ expand the feature set of the Opus. Anything new will have to be on the touchscreen only, but time will tell there. When it comes to connectivity, the Opus has a fair bit going on. There are 2 mic inputs with good quality preamps, and they're on separate channels, so they both have XLR and jack combo sockets, separate level control, individual 3-band EQ, talk over, adjustable in settings, and the excellent feedback reducer function as found on the XZ. This should be enough for all but the most demanding of mic users, and it's all easily controlled with mic 1 on the top panel and mic 2 on the front. There's a single pair of RCAs on channels 3 and 4, the outer 2, which can be switched between line and phono, and there's one extra way to get audio into the Opus via Bluetooth. This is fast becoming standard issue on new Pioneer DJ kits, and I think that's a good thing. Whilst nobody is going to be DJing with Bluetooth anytime soon, the latency is too high, it's just a handy thing to have in your toolkit. Like the other external inputs, the Bluetooth can be assigned to channels 3 or 4. Outputs are interesting. There's master 1 and 2 on balanced XLRs and unbalanced RCAs respectively, and a booth output with its own level control on balanced jacks. There's no record output, but that's not needed, as the Opus offers internal recording to any connected USB device. Then there is the zone output, again on balanced XLRs with its own level control. I'll come back to that later. And finally, there is an internal power supply with an IEC connector. Not exciting, but I would have been annoyed if the Opus didn't have that, and both sizes of headphone socket. On the subject of headphones, I'm glad the Opus has split cue, but I was initially confused by the lack of a button to enable you to cue the master. But for the first time on any Pioneer DJ hardware that I can remember, that's not actually needed, as the Cue Master blend knob will always bring in the master signal to your headphones regardless. As a user of in-ear monitors, this makes my life easier, and I'm happy to see it. The only missed opportunity, I think, is that Pioneer DJ haven't made the cue buttons on each channel correspond with the user's chosen colour for each deck. They're always white. When it comes to digital connectivity, there's even more of interest. For starters, the Opus Quad has Wi-Fi built in, a first for any Pioneer DJ standalone playback device. What does that do? At this point, not much. You can connect to Rekordbox on your computer wirelessly, access your cloud library, and that's it. But I am hoping this points to a future incorporation of streaming music into the Opus. It kind of has to, really, as Pioneer DJ have fallen very much behind the competition on that front. As for playing back local music, the Opus Quad is the first Pioneer DJ DJ device to feature 3 USB inputs, 2 on the top and 1 on the rear. This is a nice addition. There's also a USB-C port for connecting to your computer, and while some won't be fans of that, I absolutely welcome the new standard. When it comes to software support using that, the Opus will offer support for both Rekordbox in performance mode and Serato DJ Pro. I say will offer because whilst Rekordbox should be ready very quickly, Serato support isn't coming until, they say, summer 2023. This is reminiscent of the situation with the XDJ XZ where that took months and is a little disappointing. I don't even have a beta version of Serato to demonstrate it for you, I'm afraid, although as you can see, Rekordbox works fine. To wrap up connectivity, I'll mention the Ethernet port for Pro DJ Link. This works well for plugging into your local network for hardwired internet connectivity, but be aware that if you had ideas of hooking up extra CDJs to give yourself 4 dedicated players instead of using layers, that didn't work in my testing, and I'm assuming the same will apply with the DJS 1000 too. At this point, I'm going to run you through the features of the Opus Quad in a live demo format. This will take a few minutes, and then I'll come back to you with some more details on a few things. Right, so there's lots of features on here. Let's get through it as quickly as we can. We're going to load my settings to the player. We've got our source menu here. It's accessible up here with the source button. We can have 3 USBs, and I'm connected to the cloud as well because I'm connected to the internet. But I'm going to choose this one. Over here we have artist, track, key, playlist, history, etc. I'm going to click on playlist, go into this one. And then we've got various ways of then working with our tracks within the playlist. So we can sort by playlist order, by track, by BPM, by key, whatever we choose there. Scrolling is done with your finger in the first instance, and I like the momentum of that, the way it moves, the dynamics of it is very nice. And the way it scrolls, all really good. Then we've got our track filter, so we can edit that by holding it down. That gives us our track filter options. That's not new in Rekordbox, but it is a great feature. We have the menu, so we hit the menu, and then we can choose whether we can mark a track as played, and it will turn green, or unplayed. So if you've played it already but you want it to be marked as unplayed, you can do that. And we can change the font size as well. We have 3 options there to fit more on the screen or just expand things out depending on how you want it. That's entirely up to you. And then we've also got the joystick / rotary encoder over here. So we can scroll this way and that way. But if we want to go through a large playlist very quickly, we can actually just push it towards us and it pages down a page at a time. So that's very, very quick. And if we go the other way, it'll page up a page at a time. Then we have our track preview options. We can do what we've always been able to do, or for the longest time now. We can touch on the waveform and do that. But if you're working over here on this encoder, then the other thing you can do is push it to the left. It will start previewing in your headphones from the start of the track. You can't hear that, but I can hear that. And if you go to the right, it will start previewing from the middle of the track. And that I'm a big fan of. It's very accessible. So I'm scrolling through my playlist. I'm like, oh, what does that sound like? Oh, just push to the right. I'm hearing it from the middle. Really, really nice way of working. So that is your general kind of library browsing stuff. There is more to it. Of course, you can tag tracks. There's a dedicated tag track button over here. Then add stuff to the tag list. We've got our playlist page with your playlist banks as well. This has come over from the RX3. We'll go back to the browse page. So yeah, the actual browsing, very, very smooth and intuitive indeed. When it comes to loading a track then to a deck, we have options. So we can load to deck 1/3, depending on what's selected over here, or deck 2 and 4, again, depending on what's selected over here. So I'm going to choose to load that to deck 1 by pushing the button. But if we go back to browse, there is another way to do it. You hold down on it, let go, and then it gives you the option to choose a deck to load it to there as well. So again, yeah, just a very smooth way of working, multiple ways of working depending on what you want to do. Now you'll notice my LEDs on the jogs have changed color compared to the stock ones. So let's go back out to the shortcut menu. This is a very useful menu. It's been in Rekordbox hardware for a while. It has 2 pages on there. We've got your standard stuff. So we have, loading your auto cue. You can load them. We can change your waveform colors. We can do the quantized beat value, hot cue auto load, all of that. But we do also have the deck colors. So by default, decks 1 and 2 are set to amber, and decks 3 and 4 are set to white, which is this kind of off-white color. So switch over there. But you can choose them on a per channel basis, on a per deck basis. So if I want deck 1 to be red and deck 2 to be purple, I can do that. It's entirely up to you how you work with it. So yeah, deck 1 red, there you go. But yeah, I'm going to put it back to the defaults then for now. The second page on the shortcut menu is for your mixer settings. So you've got your recording over there. I'm recording to USB 1 right now, so you get audio through. And we've got the zone output assignment as well, so we can assign it to 3, 4, or master, and we can turn it on. So we can choose what's going out to the zone and whether we want to have it enabled or not, and you can preview it as well right from there. Mic 1, you can choose whether that goes to master zone or master and zone together again. So lots of stuff in there. Over here then, we've got the waveform button as well. So that just puts you back to the waveform display. You can zoom in and out on the waveforms using that rotary encoder. That's absolutely smooth. And then we have more stuff in terms of display. So you can see we've got all 4 overview waveforms here. You can choose 2 or 4 in the settings. That's entirely up to you whether you want 2 or 4. And then we have the secondary displays over here above each deck. They're not in the middle of the jog. In the jog itself, you have this kind of segmented display. Familiar from, like, say, the DDJ Flex 6, something like that. And above, we have all the information that might otherwise live in a central jog display. So we've got, again, the waveform. We have the waveform in various places. We have time remain or time elapsed. You can choose that in the settings. We have the BPM display. We have the tempo, the actual tempo range, which is adjustable with this button here. Then the key as well. You can see what key it's in. You can do key sync if you want. It's unavailable right now because we've only got 1 track loaded. Quantize and your quantized value. Beat jump length and beat loop length. So that's quite interesting. Let's get into the beat jump. We've got dedicated beat jump buttons set to 16 beats at the moment, but I can change that by holding shift and just changing the beat jump value. So now it's going to go 2 beats and go right up to 64 beats, and it'll jump right through the track. So easily adjustable on the fly. Looping is very different from traditional Pioneer DJ like CDJs and stuff like that, because we have these in and out buttons as we would on a CDJ, but we have a loop encoder now as well. So you can see I'm adjusting the beat loop length here by turning the encoder, and then I can activate the loop or deactivate it just by pushing in that loop encoder. That is a very kind of comfortable way of working. It's been in Tractor and things like that for many, many years. It's just something we've not really seen on Pioneer DJ standalone gear before, and I'm a big fan of it. Halve and double it on the fly. Very straightforward way of working. I like that a lot. So let's talk about this cue thing, right? We have access to the memory cues. You can do that with shift mode. But with this, it seems like Pioneer DJ are kind of moving away from the memory cue paradigm. They're definitely moving towards hot cues as the overriding way of working with cues within your music. But this is really interesting. So let me go forward. I'll just set a hot cue over here. We see that's green. I'm going to go through beat jump again. So another one. We've now got purple and another green. And there's an orange one. Right, so normally you hit a hot cue and you then have to hit the cue to temp cue back to it. So you might hit pause and then cue and cue from there. But with this mode turned on, whatever a hot cue I press, you can see the illumination's changed colour. The ring around the cue button has changed colour. And that's to tell me that that is now my temp cue. So I hit C. And now C is my temp cue. And that, it's different. It's definitely different from the standard CDJ way of doing things. But I'd love to see this make its way to CDJs, because actually I think it's very intuitive. Very smooth way of working. I like it a lot. Just a bit of a time saver. You know, it's not dramatic in terms of creativity perhaps, but like in terms of time saving and just a smooth workflow. Yeah, I really like that feature. So whatever hot cue you hit, that becomes your temp cue. Very, very cool. We'll talk about effects because there's a fair bit with the effects. We have the regular beat effects. They're over here on this strip, as you would expect on a record box, you know, all-in-one device like this. We have an endless encoder, so you can go through this list. It's got quite a lot of resistance on it, so you're not going to be skipping past the one you want. You can quite easily get to it. You can then let it go, and it'll just, that's echo now enabled. Selecting the effect channel, you just do by pushing here. We have physical, or sorry, soft, you know, on the screen, we have on-screen buttons for that rather than a physical dial or something over here. So I'm just going to choose channel 1 to get the track playing. And then I can enable echo on. We can change the beat value over here. We can manually dial in the time if we want, but we can change the beat value. And what's great on here, you'll notice we can't assign to the crossfader for the effects. So I have this on crossfader A, but you'll notice the echo tails out when I take the crossfader out, which is not the case on, like, you know, the DJM A9, for example, that just released. If you don't assign to the crossfader on there, you don't get the echo tails on the crossfader. But with this, you do, just by default. So whatever channel is selected, even if you've got it on the crossfader, you'll still get your echo tails. We have a, you know, the kind of regular list of Pioneer DJ effects there. We've got delay, echo, ping pong, spiral, reverb, trans, filter, flanger, phaser, pitch, slip roll, roll. And again, you can dial in the time manually, or they'll be quantized to your BPM. Obviously, they follow the BPM. You can see as I'm changing the pitch there, it will follow the BPM that's coming through from my files in Rekordbox. So that's all well and good, right? That's beat effects. We've seen that before. That's not really new. But then we have this beat effects button up here on the top left. This opens up the touch effects. Again, we've seen this before on lots of things, like, for example, the DJM S11, you know, from Pioneer DJ. We've seen it in software, but it's a great addition. Let me switch back to echo. You see also, if we just do it quickly, we don't get the list come up. We just get straight to the one we want. So let's go do a 3/4. So it does. Changes the beat length, and it high passes and low passes depending on where you do your finger. Very smooth. And you can hit hold as well, and it will stay there. You can turn quantize for the effects on or off. You can see the cue is there and it's on. And that's just a fun way of working with effects, it really is. And then back to our waveforms again. The other thing we haven't mentioned is the sound color effects. Now these, honestly, there's not a lot to say about them because these are very familiar. If you've used any recent Pioneer DJ stuff from the past few years, you'll know about these. Space goes both directions. Dub echo goes both directions. We have the parameter control. Crush. Sweep. Now this is quite interesting because sweep on the DJM A9 that just released actually sweeps both ways, and they took away the kind of gate effect when you turn it anti-clockwise, but on this we have that gate effect as found on, like, the DJM 900 Nexus 2. So if you're missing that one on the A9, you will find it here on the Opus Quad. But I love sweep, that's my favourite way of filtering high pass through something. Noise, filter. So yes, not anything really new there with the sound color effects, but if you're comfortable with them already, you'll be very comfortable with them here. Absolutely no issues with working with those. The interesting thing is there are no hardware selector buttons for, like, crossfader assignment, for example, or indeed choosing which input you're running. Now the first two channels, channels 1 and 2, you have no options for inputs. They just are the internal playback channels. That's all they are. So we can choose the crossfader assignment. It's all done here in this menu below. So I'm going to choose to assign it to crossfader A, B, or through. But on deck 3 and 4, we have more options. We can select deck 3, line, phono, and Bluetooth when we have the Bluetooth connected. So we can play Bluetooth through 3 or 4. And that is pretty interesting stuff, because what we've done is moved that off, you know, a physical set of controls there and a physical set of crossfader assign switches. They've moved it onto the screen. I think in the case of the Opus, they felt that the screen real estate was maybe less valuable than keeping the design and the aesthetic clean and smooth. I don't know, that's the kind of the way it feels, but functionally it works very, very well indeed. And this whole menu, of course, you can then assign effects to the master, assign the effects to the different channels and to the mic as well. We have also our feedback reducer easily accessible here. So yeah, all that assignment kind of thing is done down there. The last thing I want to talk about, which is I think the last thing I haven't really mentioned, is the smooth echo. Smooth echo is a fantastic feature. It's come over from the S11, was the first one we saw it on, and it's just really, really good. We can choose the settings, so we hold it down, brings us to the settings. You can choose what actually makes it trigger, so what makes it happen. So I'm just leaving it all on for now. You can choose the number of beats that it's over and the number of beats triggered by crossfader. So if you're scratching in, you might not want your smooth echo to kick in when you're doing some cutting or whatever, but I'm going to just do that now. Let's turn that setting off. I've left it on. Bring the fader down as soon as it cuts out. Same on the crossfader. Smooth echo. So you don't have to think about it. It's just automatic. I leave it on probably 90% of the time on the S11. And I would probably do so on here as well. I think smooth echo is just a really nice way of, just as you're coming out of a track, it just adds a little bit of extra smoothness. Maybe keep the volume a bit lower. Just gives that little bit of extra tail to whatever you're doing. Yeah, big fan of smooth echo around here. So as you can see, the Opus Quad performs really well, and I think what underlies everything is that this is obviously the most powerful standalone machine that Pioneer DJ have made to date. The big waveforms scroll more smoothly, things all round just feel snappier, and it can do 4 decks. This is the next generation of processing in here, there's no question about that. And Pioneer DJ really are pushing hard to bring new features along to take advantage of that processing power too. There are a few quirks that brings with it, however. Firstly, the Opus Quad uses an entirely new database format, one which is clearly more future-proof than the legacy one Rekordbox has used up to now. This is very welcome, of course, but I feel like the Rekordbox team have let the side down somewhat with how they've implemented it. Both the old and new databases can exist on the same drive at the same time, so if you have both and you plug your USB stick into the Opus, it works, and it will also work on older Rekordbox gear. That's great. But if you don't have the new database on your stick and you plug into the Opus, you get no playlist, just a bunch of artist folders. This would be a disaster for, say, a visiting DJ at a venue which has the Opus. You do get your grids, cues, etc. once a track is loaded, but that's no real compensation. To make things worse, when you connect a drive to the new version of Rekordbox, at least in the beta I've been using, you have to actively tell the software to write an Opus database to the drive or it won't bother doing so. And after you do, Rekordbox needlessly shows you both versions of your database in the devices panel. This is all very clunky and should have been avoided by making the writing of both databases the new default behavior. Opt out if you want rather than opting in and only displaying one database in the devices panel. I appreciate that introducing a new database is a big challenge, but I feel it could have been handled much better. The second slight miss is the zone output. In principle, it's a great idea and one which has received much acclaim on the flagship all-in-one from the competition, but here it just has me scratching my head. You can select which deck goes to the zone, 3 or 4, and load a track to it from within a playlist. Great, but it doesn't switch into like a dedicated zone mode. That deck still retains all the global settings of the Opus. So if you have single play mode set, it will stop at the end of each track. Okay, so change to continuous play mode. Not my preference, but I could live with it. But wait, because if you have auto cue enabled, and I've never met anyone who doesn't, then the track will still pause on load anyway. So as it stands, the zone output is effectively useless for feeding music to another area unless you're only playing long-form pre-recorded mixes or are willing to compromise on performance elsewhere. For me, this feature will only be useful once Pioneer DJ develop a bespoke zone output playback mode for it, which I'm sure they must be planning, as they have to know that this current setup just isn't enough. And that's a shame because that's the only one of the new features found on the Opus Quad which isn't a success for me. As much as I am thrown by the looks and tied to the traditional CDJ and DJM way of doing things, I love having the new stuff on there like the Smart Cue, the loop encoders, the joystick browsing, the XY pad effects and the Bluetooth. And I think that moving controls that you don't use often, like channel selection, crossfader assignments, etc. to the screen is actually a smart way of making a clean looking product without compromising on features. Add to that the obvious potential for more feature expansion on the Opus with the Wi-Fi and all the power under the hood, and what we have here is a very forward-thinking, solidly made device with excellent sound which will serve its target demographic, which I suspect is very high-end mobile DJs, very well indeed, as long as they like beige. So there you go, my thoughts on the Opus Quad from Pioneer DJ. What a fascinating experience reviewing this product has been for me. It's taught me a lot about myself, I think. Because in my head, my natural inclination is that I always want manufacturers to really push the boat out, to go ham, to seek new frontiers when it comes to design language and innovations around features and ergonomics and so on. I want that. I want the newness. I want the hotness all the time. But then you put the Opus Quad in front of me. And deep down, in my heart of hearts, I am thinking, I wish this looked like a pair of CDJs and a DJM stuck together. I wish this was an XDJ XE2. I can't escape it. It's the small c conservative within me, you know, like it's the same reason that Technics 1200s are still a part of my life. 40 years or whatever since they first debuted. You know, they've been a part of my career the whole time. The turntables that I enjoy using today, which aren't Technics 1200s, are ones which are basically copies of Technics 1200s, right? It's that comfort factor. It's that familiarity. It's what you know. And so when I'm thrown a massive curveball like the Opus Quad, yeah, it kind of spins me a little bit. Kind of puts me on an uneven footing. And it would help if I personally enjoyed the aesthetic of the Opus Quad. And I don't. Yeah, I've made that pretty clear. I don't like how this thing looks. It's not to my taste. But that's the key word, right? It's taste. And I've spoken to other people who've had early access to this hardware, and they think it's gorgeous, right? So that's just opinion, and everyone's got one of those. Everyone's entitled to one of those, and yours may well be different. I really do want to hear from you in the comments this week about how you feel about how the Opus looks, right? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's not a fan, but at the same time, I'm sure there are lots of you out there for whom you just think it looks beautiful. And absolutely, I respect that completely, right? But to move away from that, let's talk about how this thing works. And it actually works very, very well. It's clearly the most powerful standalone record box device we've had so far. It's got the 4 decks in there, which we've never had before. You know, it's clearly got potential for streaming in there with the Wi-Fi and so on. I mean, that's unrealized at the moment, but I really hope it comes, because that is still one area where at the time of making this video, Pioneer DJ is lagging behind the competition. You know, the competition have had streaming in their standalone gear for a long time, and we still don't have it in record box. So I'm really hopeful that's coming pretty soon. But I'm also confident that when it comes to the hardware, the Opus will be able to deal with that. So yeah, I'm kind of more optimistic than I've been for a minute about that. We'll see how things go moving forward. But there's a lot of stuff in there as well, which I think Pioneer DJ wouldn't have felt able to do in, say, an XDJ XE2. You know, they've done some different things with how you perform on the Opus. You know, that loop encoder, that's new. The way that you've got the assignment for the effects on the post-crossfader stuff, the lack of a master Q button, the fact that it's kind of automatic. There are lots of things in here which I think they would have been afraid to do on the more club stuff, the XDJs, the CDJs, etc. And so I think this could be pointing us in some interesting new directions for that more club-orientated gear in the future. So overall, yeah, I'm a fan of the Opus. It's just not the one for me. Like, it's not a product that I would choose. I would always go for this more club design. You know, the more functional industrial design that's just more me. And I've learned that through this process. You know, like that visceral kind of reaction I have to different hardware. It is real. You know, it's not important necessarily. It doesn't matter. Like, if you put an Opus Quad in front of me in a venue, I'd be very happy to play on it. If I played at some bougie spot, it's not really the kind of thing I do, but like if I was in some bougie bottle service kind of spot and they put an Opus Quad in front of me, yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, it works really well. Does a great job. It's just not aesthetically what I would choose. And that's okay, because I am glad that Pioneer DJ are doing something different. And I applaud them for that. You know, they are one of the biggest players, if not the biggest player in the DJ equipment industry. And they've done something different here. They have gone ham with this. They have pushed the boat out. And that, I think, is absolutely worthy of respect. Thank you for watching this episode of Beat Source Tech. I do hope you've enjoyed it or found it useful. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. I'll see you next time.